Christmas arrives, the first Christmas of war. Along the Maginot Line, the soldiers wonder if there will be others. In London, the end of the year is greeted joyfully . 1940, France takes hope again. Time is working for us, it's said on all sides. In fact, the factories work at full capacity. Tanks leave the assembly plant at the rate of 300 a month. France begins to catch up in the armaments race. It is buying more and more planes from America, 200 already. Maybe the government is waiting for the Americans to come and fight with France. President Roosevelt would certainly like to. He knows that sooner or later, America will have to come into the war. But his country is divided. Lindbergh, the hero who had been first to fly the Atlantic solo, doesn't hide his admiration for Hitler, and he campaigns against intervention in Europe. He has brought back successfully the slogan, America First. Even the United States ambassador in London, a certain Joseph Kennedy, another admirer of Hitler, preaches isolationism, while his 20-year-old son, John Kennedy, defends democracy. French factories are now producing modern aircraft. 350 in March, 550 in April. $1,600 planes in 5 months. But what can rival the Messerschmitt? March 1940. France has a change of government. Parliament has lost confidence in Daladier. Paul Reynaud replaces him. He is an Anglophile and in favor of an offensive. He has been properly elected by the vote of the majority, but he is obliged to retain Daladier as war minister. The propaganda changes its tone. We shall win because we are stronger, the posters proclaim now, showing the immense French and British empires. And it's true, on paper.
Undoubtedly, we had a certain self-confidence. I'd like to make it clear that the French army was considered a thing of importance, solid, dependable, etc. But at the same time, we were conscious of a great many weaknesses in the French army. One was very deeply conscious, for example, particularly my generation, that the French army was a great pillar of an outmoded party. For example, the development in aviation, the development in tanks, hadn't been adopted sufficiently by the French army, and therefore we had serious deficiencies.
The French army had not kept pace with the ideas that had been adopted in Germany. The tactics and strategies of the French High Command were those left over from the First World War. New ideas had been ignored. An almost unknown French colonel, who had written books which hardly anyone had read, proposed a plan as early as 1936, a war of movement with armored divisions supported by fighter planes. He is 50 years old and commands the 507th Tank Regiment. His name is Charles de Gaulle. On January the 26th, 1940, he addresses a memo to 80 French personalities. He wrote, "The present conflict will sooner or later be settled by surprise tactics, raids and pursuits in which volume and speed will infinitely exceed even the most vivid events of the past. In the present conflict, to stand still is to be beaten." From the time he takes over the government, Paul Reynaud who has known since 1936 about Colonel de Gaulle's ideas, demands that the Allies take the initiative. Mr. Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, is reluctant at first, but Mr. Churchill, First Sea Lord, is enthusiastic. During a meeting of the Supreme Council in London, the Allies decide to attempt an operation in Scandinavia in an effort to cut off the steel supply of the Germans. At the beginning of April, the Allies lay mines around the entrance to Norwegian ports, send an ultimatum to Norway and Sweden, and prepare several landings along the coastline. But Hitler accelerates his advance. He takes 4 hours to occupy Denmark and invades Norway. A new demonstration of lightning warfare. On April the 9th, 6 German divisions make a surprise landing. The Norwegians haven't had time to mobilize and attempt vainly to defend themselves, but they're crushed by the Luftwaffe. The Germans have air supremacy at all times. In 48 hours, they have occupied practically the entire country. In Oslo, Quisling, the Norwegian Nazi, has taken power. The king takes refuge in the north, then in London. For Hitler, it's another victory of staggering proportions. 8 days later, the Allies invade and the British land in the middle of Norway. They won't get far. They have to re-embark at the end of a week. For in Norway, the invincible Royal Navy makes a bitter discovery. Supremacy at sea is nothing without supremacy in the air. The Luftwaffe has sunk one of the few British aircraft carriers, the Courageous. Only a month later, the end of the whole campaign takes place outside Narvik in Norway, with the French Expeditionary Force commanded by General Bétuat. In the glimmer of the polar night, the 13th Brigade of the Foreign Legion, a battalion of Alpine troops, and 2 Polish battalions succeed in landing. After 10 days of hard fighting, the French finally take the town. It's the first Allied victory of the war, a victory won on land by General Bétuat, and which succeeded in stopping the steel supply to the Germans. But not for long. For only 24 hours, in fact. The next day, the Expeditionary Force is recalled urgently to France. There, the real war has begun.